Hello and welcome to Chats, a television podcast, Season 4, The ChatzRoom. My name is Magellan, and I'm joined by a man who, a couple years ago, was one tabloid fuck-up and one bad rating away from hosting his own podcast. And now he's co-hosting a podcast with me. It's Alan.
Oh, that's really good. I wrote that line down. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Excellent work. How you doing, friendo?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm having a good time. We're starting a little bit earlier, which means when we hit record, the sun was still up. That was wild.
Was it? It's winter. Was there real sun?
It was dusk.
It's hotel dusk.
Yeah.
It was a little dusky. Yeah, I mean, we used to always joke like years ago on this podcast about like we're recording early. It's only 1:00 in the afternoon this time. But I like this. That line made me sad because I was like, oh, podcasts are cool. Oh, I like podcasts.
I know.
But yeah, I'm here. I'm ready to do this.
Well, Alan, we're not doing this alone. Can you believe
We have
it?
help?
We have help. This week, we're talking about 2 episodes of The Newsroom, Season 1, Episode 7, May 1st, and Season 1, Episode 8, The Blackout Part 1, Tragedy Porn. And in order to help us with this first half, we have a guest. You can call them anything, but especially call them late for dinner. It's Frankie.
Hey, how y'all doing? Please don't call me Deep Throat.
Yeah, I sidestepped that one on purpose.
Welcome
to the show.
What is it? It's a sacred text?
Yeah, it's a sacred pseudonym.
It's a sacred pseudonym.
We wouldn't dare besmirch it.
Hey, y'all, the newsroom's okay, apparently.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, especially the first one. It's really good. It has parts that annoyed me, but, you know, it's written by Aaron Sorkin, so that's expected.
Fair.
Frankie, I wanted to introduce you by asking you sort of what enticed you to the Newsroom. I know you watched this show either when it came out or you've watched it before, certainly.
So I watched it. I think I watched it when it came out, some of it, because my in-laws had HBO, and whenever we were there, I would catch here and there, and then I watched it later on. Once HBO Go was a thing. I think I might have even watched it on like DVDs and Netflix when, you know, DVDs and Netflix were like still a popular thing you did.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I love this show, it was initially like attracted to the show, is that I was very into news in the year 2010, 2011. I was in college and I was working for the college newspaper, and I had a column that was basically me looking at the Rachel Maddow show and finding one story. It was a weekly newspaper, so one story a week that I thought was interesting that I didn't hear any other news organizations talking about except, you know, the Maddow show, and just like write a tiny little column about it. And most of season 1 is those type of stories, like especially some of the. I think you guys already covered like some of the Scott Walker protests and some of the other stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I remember watching the news at the time, and like in the episode of the Congress, I remember seeing those exact bits of interview, like almost line by line, that Will does. Like there's one in that episode, I think, that's talking about denying access to a black person if the owner wanted to, the business could deny access to a black person. And I remember watching Rachel interview Rand Paul, I think it was, and do that same event. So I love the nostalgia of the show is based on that. I remember those stories, but also I like news a lot, especially from that era. So that's what kind of got me to it. And then I watched it, and then I watched it again, and then I watched it again, and I've probably seen every episode at least 3 times.
Oh, hell
Some probably closer to 10 times because my wife also loves the show, and there was a period of time where she only watched the Newsroom. Like she would have it in loop, the 3 seasons over and over again. Uh, I for sure have seen episodes of season 1 at least 10 times, some of them. Season 2 and 3 is less because if I get the choice to watch episodes of the Newsroom, they're from season 1.
So, do you like the Newsroom?
I think I do, but I also see its problems, but I also see like, hey, if this show was slightly, like, not a lot sometimes, just like slightly different, it would be so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I don't even want to call it a guilty pleasure because I don't feel guilty when I watch it. It has a good rhythm that can just make it entertaining to watch.
That's a very good
Yeah.
point. It's definitely something you can like enjoy, despite itself.
Yeah.
I feel like I've hit that. I just recorded the last feedback segment a little while ago, and we got some email that was like, I know why people like this show because it makes them feel good and it feels relevant to them, but I more just like marveling at how much it can mess up important things. And how much it could be such a good show, and then it just flubs, and that's so interesting, always.
No, definitely.
And this episode, May 1st, definitely epitomizes that. Like, really, really overdramatic, overwrought, like, episode concerning the assassination of Osama bin Laden by SEAL Team 6. And it's really proud of itself. Magellan, how do we get into this?
Well, I guess we just start by talking about the first scene, which has nothing to do with the rest of the episode, and just kind of enjoy ourselves. It's a party. They're having a party. It's a lot of fun. You know what they got at this party? They have a game that involves slapping the table or something.
It's not a real game.
They
Is
have
that a made-up drinking game?
Yeah, they have a couple of years old copy of Guitar Hero. Because I'm pretty sure that game was old by this point and not cool anymore.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think that's Guitar Hero 3. I mean, to be fair, at the time, I was still going to house parties and playing Guitar Hero. Actually, no. I was going to house parties and playing Rock Band.
Rock Band,
That's
yeah.
what
Yeah,
you do
yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
drunk.
Right.
So, yeah, Guitar Hero wouldn't make sense.
Mhm.
Well,
It would have been Rock Band.
They
that
got
was
drugs. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I'm just going to be the person who knows too much about video games. Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock was out in 2010, and that was one of the first ones where they had like band stuff, so they just kind of became Rock Band. But
Right.
that whole moment just felt like someone paid to get them to name drop that.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "What? Realistically, this would have been Rock Band, but you said Guitar Hero because somebody threw some money around. I bet.
Right.
But
So
anyways,
they have this fun party, and then the party is interrupted by a few important plot lines, and I'm going to describe them in order of ascending importance.
okay,
Can I
great.
just say my favorite bit of the party?
Please
before,
do.
Kendra and what's the name of the other character? The two token black characters playing chess against each other.
Well, he was playing against himself, and then
No, he's playing against the other the black lady because he makes a move and then she makes a move and then he looks at it again. At least that's how I saw it. Like he's playing against her, but she doesn't even have to like pay attention.
sit at
She
the
just
table. I
knows
see
what
what you're saying.
move. Yeah, she's like having a drink and hanging out, and then she just does her move in 2 seconds while he has to think of it very hardly.
His name is Gary, by the way.
Gary. Did I get Kendra's name correctly?
Yes.
Yes, good. So yeah, Gary and Kendra.
My two favorite token characters.
So, four plot lines that emerge out of the scene in ascending importance. I misspoke when I said 3. The least important is some about some guy who was assassinated, like Osama bin Laden.
Whatever.
Or something.
Gaddafi.
Gaddafi, something like that. Second, least important, Charlie gets some kind of secretive call, whatever. Second important is Will gets really high. And
Hell
then
yeah.
I think by far the most important plot line is that Lisa said "I love you" to Jim the night before, and he said it back, but he didn't mean it.
And she saw Maggie's reaction on the FaceTime phone
Yeah,
call.
it's just really, it's just
I take back what I
dig into
said
that.
about this show being good.
Oh no.
Let me just
Yeah.
say this is the Jim Maggie plotline that I was the least bothered by, I think, of the show so far. If I can be
That's
honest.
fair. Because they keep it to a minimum and to like corners, so it doesn't really feel like it involves anyone else. Every other character has other stuff to deal with, like the assassination of Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
But whenever we go and check in with these three characters, oh man, and there was a good resolution in this episode, and they decided, nope, let's keep going.
Basically, she says it's like the most sitcom-y romance plot ever. She says I love you. Everyone agrees it's a little too soon. He feels awkward about it. Maggie says you should break it off. Don't lead her on. He's like, I guess I will. And then when he's about to, she breaks it off because she's actually an intelligent human being who listens.
Yep.
Breaks up with him. And then we hand wave it. Yay, done. We did it. But now he kind of likes her. But also Maggie clearly likes Jim. But also Don's an idiot and doesn't know what's going on. But he does know what's going on.
And we can just be done with that plot now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cross it in the garbage.
Yeah. I think the only note that had of that plot is that Lisa is a saint for just being like, you know what? No, yeah, let's finish this.
Yeah.
But then immediately she falls for Jem being like, let's go out on a first date for real this time.
I took your breath away, didn't I? Oh,
That's such a bad line.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
All right. So, anyway, let's
climb
talk,
out of the hole, Magellan.
Yeah, let's get on out of there. Let's talk about the Charlie Skinner thing, since I think that's kind of self-contained. And that doesn't really pay off until the next episode anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he gets a secretive call from a source who he doesn't want to call Deep Throat.
Late for dinner.
Yeah, late for dinner. And the not great phone acting, I'm going to admit, on Charlie Skinner's part there. But that's okay. And then all we really get out of it is that this is a person who knows something and is inside the government and has further secrets to share. And that gets that gets spiraled out in the next episode. So I guess hold off on that. Let's see.
Yeah, this calls just to prove credibility.
Right.
He tells Charlie, your entire staff is going to get an email that says to get to work. And then a minute, X number of minutes later, you're going to get a notice that the president is going to announce something of national importance. And that's how I'm going to prove to you that I'm legit. And he says, I think he mentions in this one that he does probably work for the NSA, or that's implied.
Yeah, I think at least by the end, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much late for dinner. I like where that pays off too. I think it plays in this episode very much like I mentioned last week how, like, if the Newsroom was an anime, how differently its plots would be handled. And, like, this is the, the whole series-long villain's arc conspiracy that would be building. But really, it's just that they, have an inside man.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Also,
like, Charlie would be talking with the secret phone person for, half a season.
Yes, and if this was an anime, we would get a shot of the secret phone person, like in darkness, with reflective glasses.
Right.
Petting a cat, yes.
Like a cool hat on or something. Yeah, that's true. I think, again, sort of a self-contained area of the plot world, but honestly my favorite part of the episode is Don, Sloan, and Elliot trapped on a plane together.
Mine too.
I realized, you know what? I think this is my favorite subset of the cast, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I think
But,
when
yeah.
I originally watched it, was where I got sold. Honestly, these might be my 3 favorite characters in this show. No
Yeah.
joking. Sloane can be good, but sometimes she suffers from being written by Aaron Sorkin and being a
Yep.
woman.
Yep.
And it has to be clothes, fashion. But when she doesn't have to be clothes, shopping, and is my ass big, she's wonderful. She's a really good character.
Yeah, when she doesn't have to seduce teenage Lester in the other seat on the airplane.
Lester the unlikable.
She's really great. Yeah, I loved Dawn like having this shouting match with the flight attendant, even though it was the most not in real life thing, and it felt like weird wish fulfillment. I still really liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like Dawn.
I like how Dawn comes out looking like a douche and like an asshole for doing this, but also likable.
Yeah, because he has good reasons to be super stressed out and angry, and then he's deferential to America's pilots and servicemen. So that
was such a weird shot. Oh my god,
I got teary eyed during that shot. I didn't full on cry, but I got teary eyed.
Like, I get it.
It's good acting.
It is definitely good acting. I think, Magellan, you might have said this to me at one point a long time ago, but like the difference between it's the same thing with music. Like the difference between good and like amazing and terrible music is like a tiny thread, and then the difference between good and bad acting is even thinner, because you can see that scene where he looks at the pilot's like little air badge and sees all of like the sort of fanciness that's on their uniforms and goes, oh my god, the United States services, like this is amazing, these people are doing great work, wow, and these are the people who deserve to hear the news.
I don't know, the newsroom just there's just, I also was like, emotionally I felt that moment, but at the same time the soft focus on their lapels and Dawn turning around and saying, we reported the news tonight.
That's the
worst. It's laughable, but in the moment you're like, half of me wants to laugh at this, and half of me's like, yes. Hope. Yeah. Oh, it's just confusing.
He says it like they just closed the book on something. We reported the news tonight. Like what did you didn't do? What did you said 5 words.
3 people.
Yeah, to 3 people. Oh my god.
It's like, it's kind of like wish fulfillment. It's like feel good. It's like those Hallmark movies, Yeah. Like it's feel good wish fulfillment for liberals.
Yes.
That's the whole show, though.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. No. Yeah. Definitely. This is Hallmark for the 30, 40 something white liberal.
Yeah, who still want to be sort of chest beating nationalists. Yeah. And are like okay with war.
Yeah.
This is the aspect of this episode that made me feel the most like I was high or myself or something, was that so much of it is about like, if we say the words, then that becomes a sort of truth in and of itself. Mm-hmm. Like as soon as we can go on the air and say this, we have like created something, and it's like giving credence to the news that like I do think it deserves. But it feels weird to just have the characters tell me our work is important and it's meaningful that we're doing it. Like there's
instead of just showing it to you.
Exactly. Mackenzie literally has a line where they're like, "Oh, you're 3 minutes behind," and she says, "If I can make him dead 1 minute sooner, my whole career in journalism will have been worth it." And it's like, realistically, is it? Like I know why, because all of news is about like timing and stuff, and the whole idea is when you tell somebody that. Before you said that, they had no idea any of this was happening. So you're changing the world in their head.
That just feels like, as someone, like I mentioned, I worked in a weekly student newspaper. And before that, in Mexico, I grew up in Mexico, I worked in an actual legit radio and TV station. We did the news 2 times a day, live on the radio and live to tape on TV. But like we would record it, the evening show would record like at 3 p.m., 3 or 5 p.m., but then it wouldn't show up on TV until 7 because we would have to film it and then edit it, put chyrons and everything, and then actually put it to an actual tape because it was 2008, and I guess sending files over email wasn't a big thing, and then drive that tape to the broadcasting center because we only had a radio broadcasting antenna, and somewhere would put the tape in.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so like we covered news and we covered breaking news, on the radio, but like never once did I ever hear any of the many professional journalists I worked with go, if we do this 1 minute earlier, my career would have been worth it.
Well, it makes it feel, and this is something I do actually kind of like about Aaron Sorkin's work, is that he like makes really generic, boring things feel like magic. Like what we're talking about is that the whole episode is them not realizing maybe what the president's announcement is going to be about, but really we all know it's about the assassination of bin Laden, and they can't say that until there's 2 levels of confirmation about it. And as soon as they get one and then sort of a questionable second confirmation, people start just saying it out loud. And another example of like the feeling that like this is magic is when the 2 police are they've brought Lonnie in. And I think it's like Don who whispers, or somebody whispers into Lonnie's ear, and then he's like, "Oh," like he just like learned a spell that's gonna like
Will.
chant someone. Yeah, Will tells him. Yeah, and then he tells the cops, and then they like get emotional, and you're like, "That's."
It's like it's nice, so you can't be mad of like you can imagine if you buy the fiction, if you like. Hi, my name is Frankie. I always bring analogies to wrestling. If you buy into the kayfabe of Newsnight, that these are actual real cops living in New York in 2011, maybe they were cops in 2001, or they knew
people,
or
like,
they were inspired
by
to
the
become
event.
cops.
Yeah.
Because of that, and then you see them being told, we got Osama bin Laden, he's dead, and you see their faces. If you're bought into it, you want to feel good about it. But if you step one moment outside, you're like, oh, like you can see, going back to wrestling, you can see the punch not landing. You can see the person taking the bump from air.
Totally. Man, the Newsroom is totally wrestling, isn't it?
Kinda. I was actually thinking about this also for Aaron Sorkin's other show I really like a lot, Studio 60.
Yes!
You just made Machan's day!
Honestly, I've seen the Newsroom more just because Studio 60 is harder to watch unless you have the DVDs. But I think I might like Studio 60 more. But it's just because they deal with things that are not as important, so the jokes land better.
Yes. Exactly.
So like, oh yeah, we let a live snake in the building when we were filming a fake commercial about a fake video game, and now people are scared and trapped with the snake, but it's still funny. Like there's a threat, there's the snake, but it's not the threat of, okay, are we under attack? The president's gonna say something.
Right.
The stakes are so much lower that I think it's easier to buy into them.
I will say in this episode, it was easier to tolerate the comedy because we knew that there was no bad news from the character's perspective.
Yeah.
Like we could kind of follow them along, having these harebrained theories about what was happening, knowing ultimately that it wasn't the BP oil spill. And so I could worry about whether or not Jim said I love you to Lisa, because it wasn't about a mass shooting or some other.
Yeah, this wasn't a terrorist attack. This wasn't the marathon bombing, and good luck on that one. This was just, we knew the outcome. The dramatic irony was there for us to see, so we didn't have to deal with the, what's that word, like the suspense. We knew things ended up good, so then the suspense then becomes, can Don, Sloan, and Elliot get out of the plane to join everybody in time, instead of what is the president gonna say?
It had the effect of, it almost felt like kind of a bottle episode, like a low, despite the importance of this moment, because we knew it was going to end in this like rah rah, America's the best, they're definitely going to get there and it's going to be fine. There was no suspense, but for me that worked, oddly. Yeah, it's something we haven't seen in one of these episodes before. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say about our friends stuck on the plane before we kind of just tie
Elliot
up.
is a good father. I've forgotten that that's like one of his main like character traits.
He's a nice
cute.
dad.
Yeah,
He's
cute.
just a good dad, a good family man. Like the first thing he says is like, "I wish I could have been home with my wife so we could wake up the kids and take them to the studio so they could see this with us." And that's like, okay, you're a good guy. You're a good dad.
Yeah.
And then he also says, he's like, they're checking Twitter, and he's like, my daughter just texted me saying, "Daddy, are you the smartest person in the world?" And he said, "Yes."
Yes, I am.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of friends that have kids, but I got to hang out with one of them last weekend for a con, and they're from Canada, and they were here in Texas, and they have like I think it's like a 1 or 2 year old. I think it's a 1 year old. And we were walking down the street, and he got a call. He got like a video message from like his kid, like playing with the camera and the phone. And I didn't see it, but I could hear it. Mm-hmm. And then like hearing his face like light up by seeing it, it was like, oh, that's nice. And that's kind of like the feeling Elliot gives me whenever he interacts with his family. Like, oh,
yeah, that feels good. I think that's it with the plane stuff. Any other notes from the Bin Laden plotline now that we have sort of cleared everything else away?
You want me to go into my actual wrestling?
Yes,
tirade?
please do that. Yes, I want that.
Okay, so there's two lines. When what's her name? The girl playing
Kaylee?
I know what?
Neil's girlfriend?
Haley? Yeah.
Kaylee.
Is it Kaylee? Okay, I'm bad at names with everyone.
No,
as
everyone's
you can
bad at
tell.
It's fine.
There's a lot of characters. Okay. So she's playing Guitar Hero, and her phone vibrates, and Neil is like, and she's like, "Hey, read me what it says." And like, "Oh, it's tweets. Yeah, it's your newsfeed tweets." And first of all, who looks at their highlights? I've never known anyone who leaves that feature on.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense.
But like he's like, "Oh, some epic pictures and this and this. Oh, and you have a tweet from The Rock."
Maybe she just has it set up that she wants a push notification every time The Rock tweets.
Yeah, fair.
Maybe that's just
relatable.
Life.
I could see that. It was like, oh, a tweet of The Rock that says, "I just got news that will shock the world. Damn proud to be an American, home of the free, land of the free, home of the brave." And she immediately thinks he's coming back to either wrestle against Triple H or avenge Triple H. She says two different lines in two different parts of the show. Okay, so I have a paragraph for this. This is The Rock's wrestling timeline from the year 2011. He had been retired and out of the ring for almost 15 years at this point. On February 14th, The Rock was announced as the host of WrestleMania. On April 3rd, WrestleMania 27 happened, hosted by The Rock. This is notably one of the worst WrestleManias in modern history. Only the Undertaker Triple H match is worth seeking out at all. The main event in particular, which is where The Rock was used, was bad, making everyone in it look bad and serving only to further the storyline between The Rock and John Cena by having The Rock cost John Cena the championship. By this time, by that I mean May 1st, it was common knowledge that the main event of the next year's WrestleMania would be a Rock versus Cena, a match that they dubbed once in a lifetime, despite the fact that it would be repeated the following year. And those matches are okay. They're not like, they don't set the world on fire, but they're fine. This really hampered the momentum of other wrestlers at the time that were put in the back seat for the spotlight to be given on part-timer Rock. One more thing. Triple H was nowhere near this program, and as I mentioned earlier, he was feuding with The Undertaker.
Yeah.
So that The Rock would be returning after he was already back to face someone who he had no programming with, who wasn't even the champion at the time, is bad writing. Shame on you, Aaron Sorkin.
That's just bad research. Also,
yeah.
incredible work.
Yeah, there we go. That's the paragraph I wrote.
So, what it sounds like is nobody even tried. They found some names and were like, Triple H and The Rock.
Like The Rock probably, I didn't check, but he probably actually made that tweet, and they were like, oh yeah, Rock, wrestling, Triple H, that's a name, okay, let's do it.
Also, if it was about the Bin Laden thing, who would he have heard it from?
They say something about he's related to somebody who's a Navy SEAL or something.
So I don't know if that's true or who knows.
The best thing about tweets in this episode is that the real reveal, the second confirmation, comes from Joe Biden. Direct messaging Will saying, "Hey, by the way, Bin Laden's dead. He's super dead, dude. Just letting you know."
Sliding into Will's DMs like, "Hey, Bin Laden is dead."
God, I want to DM Joe Biden so badly.
Holy crap!
I'm so mad that isn't my life to a T. Is getting to DM Joe Biden, getting a DM from Joe Biden being like, "Sup, bud? By the way, Bin Laden's dead. LOL. Text you later."
Totally good news about it. Have fun.
And he's like, "Oh, my phone buzzed. Whoops." Anyways, publish the story. I'm Charlie.
Have we talked about how Will being on drugs is really good?
It's really good.
It's great, yeah.
Or is that part of the other plot? Are we finishing off the?
I think we're there. I think we can holistically talk about what happens in the news building now. They really. I typically am against any depiction of like this character's on drugs this episode because I think it's just lazy. I will say this. The newsroom does it in a way that's sort of understated that I actually appreciated and liked. Like we never see through his eyes like, oh, the world's swimming.
Yeah.
It's just little jokes like he ran over and he grabbed a falafel on the way. I can get behind that.
He's just like disoriented and not paying attention. Yeah. Which like it's totally believable. Like he repeats things or he needs things repeated towards him. I do love the fact that when they're telling him about the drugs, he needs to like compliment himself to be like, oh, I was a great athlete and that's why I'm hurt. That's why I need the drugs. Like that's so much Will McAvoy's character.
Right.
He can't say a sentence without complimenting himself.
Well, and then he also has to compliment his tolerance and say that he's a medical marvel.
Yeah.
And that's very true.
And he took Vicodin plus the 2 pot brownies.
Yeah, it's fun.
Okay, so the big question is, did he take the brownies before or after him and Jim play guitars for the rest of the party?
I think they were stone sober when they did that. That seems like something that they would just do. Seems like the whole point of throwing the party in his house was because that's where his guitar was.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a really quick shot that I really hope they bring back, is the two of them playing guitar together. It was ridiculous.
It's silly, but like slightly believable. Like, oh yeah, if you got people together, I suppose, and they both play guitar. I guess. And like in the episode, I think it was the episode before that I told y'all I watched an accident. When they're doing a position research on Will, it's like, oh yeah, he played guitar for Leonard Cohen.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
You can't just say those things. Television show. You can't just be that guy. He really does. I forgot to mention this in the episode. In that scene, he really does sound like a parody of like the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or like Forrest Gump or something, where it's like he played guitar with Leonard Cohen. He did baseball for 10 years, and he was a savant at everything.
I had so much notes on that episode because it was like, it felt to me like they were writing fan fiction of the real world, and they were just saying, oh yeah, this character knows this person, and they're the most important person.
Yeah.
I have a lot of like funny lines, some of which are from this whole newsroom scene.
Yeah, tell us some of those.
Yeah.
Just in the background during some of the Maggie Jim stuff when they're on FaceTime with Lisa, and she's like, I have FaceTime on my phone. It's 2010. It's 2011. What is FaceTime on my phone doesn't mean anything. Because I guess there was FaceTime on Mac. I looked this up. Like it was just video chat. But she's like, I ran into some. This is the most like old men writing about criticism of young people. But she's like, I bumped into someone who was also on FaceTime on his phone. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, these episodes, both of them, I think, have a lot of old man yells at clouds, but switch clouds for technology.
Yeah.
100%. And then I guess so. Like the way everybody leaves the party is they all kind of rush out and take all these like taxis at once. And some of them take the subway. And then Will, we have to remember that Lonnie is still his security person, and their interactions are really fun and one of the most like charming comedic scenes. Doesn't have to do with anything plot related, but just Lonnie running out of the car to catch Will, who jumps out to go get out of traffic, and then two cops immediately are like, "Get the fuck onto that door and don't move."
Yeah.
And he's like,
Big black man, they're immediately, their guns are out.
"Ain't nothing I can do about being big and black at the same time."
Such a good line.
Yeah,
Such
that
a
was
good
good.
line.
That was
Terry
good.
Crews, be my dad.
I haven't heard the latest episode because it just came out by the time of recording. So you guys like Lonnie, I'm assuming?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like Terry Crews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that Lonnie.
Yeah, it's
I don't.
Terry Crews playing Terry Crews here.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. Because they haven't done much more with Lonnie other than like, hey, it's Terry Crews in the scene, and I like that.
Yeah, I think that's basically what you're gonna get from Lonnie, but it's not bad. It's entertaining
For sure.
And then sorry, just my last like line was when they're like about to get off the plane and Dawn is freaking out. And this is such a weird, like, again, speaking of like weirdly charged lines, Elliot is like, everything's gonna be fine, and then Dawn goes, I can never count on you to be Jewish.
Yeah, because he says he's not anxious enough.
Like, man, someone chose that line and said, yep, good line. And it works with Dawn's character to like play that card. But it just comes out of left field. It feels like very, very severe.
Yeah, and he kind of, this is the first episode where he says his own last name to sort of like, I guess, give that line credibility or something. That was weird that he had to like fully introduce himself.
Oh, right.
I can't help but feel that those things are related.
Don Kiefer?
Yeah, this is the episode where Sorkin was like, all right, I think he's Jewish. Let's just go full on.
He's allowed to be Jewish now.
Make sure we communicate that to the audience.
Before we leave the house party forever, one last thing. When Lisa FaceTimes Jim, he's hiding, and you originally think he's hiding to do work, and that's what he says. But he's hiding to watch sports, and he's acting very shameful about it. He's like covering the screen so that Maggie doesn't see that he's watching sports.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense, did it?
Yeah.
Huh.
I think this is just the second time that Jim has neglected like having fun at a party to go sit on his computer and do like solitary things. Be it in New Year's Eve, it was him like doing work, and now it's just him watching baseball because he's a social nerd. He doesn't know how to be around people.
Not everyone can be an extrovert. Aaron Sorkin, don't shame us.
Yeah. I've got a couple stray thoughts, and then I think I'm kind of spent on this one. Let's see. I just want to draw attention to the fact how many times we should really keep a running list of how many times a character says "I get it" to cut somebody else off who's like talking for too long. Because that happened in this one. I feel like that happens a lot.
Can we role play one of those real quick, John? I'm gonna rant and then you can cut me off.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, so the Obama administration basically declares that people with rights deserve this. And
All
this
right.
and
I
this.
get it.
All right. Well, okay.
It's like that. Thank you. This has been Chat's Theater. I appreciated the line where Jim is saying that Lisa can come to observe the newsroom going on, where he says, "We don't know what's going on, but it can only be very good or very bad." That kind of set the theme and the tone of the episode in a way that I really appreciated. Just an elegant moment there. Will looking at the construction and saying this is going to be a great city once they finish building it. Sort of yeah, that was good. That was clean.
As somebody from New York, that line must have hit you.
Yeah, I appreciated that one. Charlie warns everyone to not let the wish be the father of the thought. It's good old
I don't
man
remember
advice.
this line.
It's when everybody was like, "Oh, it's obviously Bin Laden," and he says, "Well, we can't." Basically, he's saying we can't just assume that because it's what we want to be true.
It will make truth. Oh.
So we have to assume everything, every possible direction. Call back to the first episode of The West Wing, where they're talking about how nobody's agreed on how to spell the word Gaddafi. That was like in the first episode of The West Wing.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Nice.
a character was doing the crossword or something, the New York Times crossword, and said they were going to call the crossword editor because they spelled Gaddafi wrong. Yeah, it's that whole thing. And then, there's another thing. And then they were looking up ways to get kicked off the airplane. And one of them Sloan said was to shout unpopular political opinions. And so Elliot says, "Man, that Genghis Khan had some pretty good ideas." I like that a lot.
Like the most inoffensive person
I
ever.
really like that guy. And then just a kind of a final thought. The episode ends with the camera panning away from Will giving his address to Obama stepping up to the podium. And it just made me wonder what it would have been like if Osama bin Laden had been shot during the Trump administration, and how that speech would have looked a whole lot different. And got a little teary-eyed there, a little nostalgic for a different time.
It's well, it would have had a different tone, because I remember they play like a big chunk of that speech over the credits, which is a cool touch. But that address definitely didn't have the feeling of like what this episode does, which is like America is amazing and like we did it, and like this is to some people a sort of makeup for 9/11, whereas for Katie or Kaylee it felt like it was not. I feel like under the current administration it would have been more like we did it, and like failing to mention like the work of like the hundreds of people.
We have the best troops, we have the best SEALs, and I'm the best president, whatever. But that was very like people focused, and
it wasn't like a fire and fury speech. This speech was like, we finally finished this chapter. It was very like melancholic and kind of like remember almost 10 years ago when this happened. Well, hard work, we finally got here. It's not the end, but we did one thing.
And that was why I really liked, we were talking earlier about how we liked the Kaylee sort of like confession scene where she's standing on the balcony and talking about how she had hoped this would feel really amazing because her father was I think a construction worker or something on the...
No, he was they said something about he was a partner at like one of the firms that had an office there.
Right.
He worked in the towers.
So she was like hoping that this announcement would like feel really like a huge relief and make her happy, but she felt okay. And it's like, that address is the reason that people felt like that. Is it wasn't like we did it, like nice job. It's like, this was a very hard fight, and there's a lot more work to do. But we did something. Like, let's keep going.
For sure.
Permission to go on a dumb tangent for like 10 seconds.
I mean, you're on the show where we do that all the time.
That's the whole show.
I know.
Permission granted.
So, have you seen the romantic movie Remember Me?
No.
So, can I spoil you the very end of Remember Me?
Yes. I mean, yes.
So, it's like a dumb romantic movie with the guy from Twilight, whose name I can't remember.
Robert Pattinson.
Yes, and
high five, nice.
And the Australian girl from Lost,
Emily DeRavin.
Good job.
I watched a lot of Lost.
So it's them, and it's just like he's a bad boy, and she's a rich girl, and the father doesn't like him. Like, it's very stereotypical romance comedy. And then the last scene is he's on the phone with her. I think he's on the phone with her. Or she's thinking about him because he's traveling, and she looks up to the sky, and then we see him on the plane, and his plane is going to the World Trade Center.
Oh my God!
Yikes.
That's how that movie ends. And every time anything references 9/11, that dumb movie pops in my head because like who thought this was a good idea?
Oh my god, that's kind of distasteful.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Ugh.
A tad, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm looking at the summary. None of it mentions that. It's just about like living life to the fullest because you don't know what'll happen. Like maybe you'll end up in 9/11. Ugh, I want to barf.
I'm gonna Google it just to make sure I didn't dream it, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
I know there was that other movie, the Adam Sandler movie with the 9/11 thing. That was pretty. That people actually like. Rain Over Me.
Yeah.
Rain,
Remember Me.
Rain Over Me.
It's a
yes.
2010 movie, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember
The movie
Me,
exists.
9/11 scene on YouTube when I Google it. So yep.
Yep.
Wow.
Oh, I think that's all I got for 5-1, guys.
Same.
I think I just have two things and then I'm done.
Please.
Charlie's story about telling the news without being super sure and how that cost people their lives.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Like that was a good bit. Like he's not just saying let's wait for Wade. He's saying let's wait to make sure we're not endangering any soldiers or any civilians.
I appreciated that.
That's a good. Yeah, I like that. And throughout these episodes that I rewatched, I can't help but feel that they always make, or Mackenzie, or like Mackenzie makes herself, or the writers make Mackenzie feel kind of like incompetent and not good at her job.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
And there is one bit in this episode where I was like, that's a producer. That's someone who's good at her job. And it's when she threatens to cut, or she actually cuts the feed from the DC when they're like, no, we're just gonna go with it. We don't care what you New York elitists say. We're gonna tell the news. And she just cuts the feed, and the room operator, she asked the room operator, do you think that's enough? And he's like, a couple more seconds. I really like that scene.
Yeah, that was great.
It made me be like, oh, I see why Mac is in this job. Whereas nothing else really makes me think that.
Mm-hmm.
God, that same room is where when they finally cut to the announcement, some dude who's just like the graphics guy pulls out a New York. What's the hat, Magellan?
The fire department hat.
Yeah, he just has a New York Fire Department hat that he puts on and then stands up.
Yeah, like he must have been just carrying that around for 10 years, waiting for the right moment.
Like at the same time, like they wrote that in, and that's dumb. But like at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to make fun because like if I buy into him, like he probably knew someone.
Right, exactly.
But if you take him in, we're like, oh no, wait, this is a fictional character. Yeah, no, this is dumb.
It just feels manipulative on the part of Aaron Sorkin.
They want you, and they mostly succeeded in my part. They want you to feel things, to feel like emotions about this.
Right. I was willing to feel and be manipulated with the pilot on the plane and the cops who, for no reason, chased Lonnie all the way to the news building. I was fine with those, but the guy, absent of any human being pretending to be a firefighter, just the guy putting on the firefighter hat, I was against that.
So I just looked at my notes to make sure I wasn't missing anything, and immediately after praising Mac assuming that if someone sends her an email is because they want to date her.
Yep. Yep.
He wants to date you too?
Yep. Yes.
Oh, Aaron Sorkin should get someone to write women.
Or just like hang out with a woman. Is he married?
Yeah.
Talk to your wife.
I think he's married multiple times. Let me double check.
That's not shocking. I'm sorry, that was mean. To Aaron Sorkin.
Stop being mean to Mr. Sorkin. Personal life. Thank you, Wikipedia. Married in 96, divorced in 2005.
I don't think he's been remarried. I think just the one.
Yeah, I don't think he's been married. Dated Kristen Chenoweth. Yeah,
Wow.
no.
Oh, he likes blondes. I guess gentlemen do prefer blondes. Nailed it. Ugh. Anyways, Magellan.
Yes.
Hi. This is the segment where we talk about the news. Do you think there would be any news to talk about besides the Bin Laden thing, or do you think that's what May 1st was all about?
I bet there's more.
I bet there's more. I feel like I remember there being more than that day.
Well, let's take a look.
Pope Benedict XVI removes William Martin Morris as the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Toowoomba in Australia for allegedly advocating the ordination of women and married priests.
Whoa, that's kind of cool.
I mean, it's not cool that he did it, but yeah. It's a cool little bit of news. Also, Pope John Paul II is beatified by Pope Benedict XVI.
I don't know what that means.
Beatification is a recognition accorded by the Catholic Church for a dead person's entrance into heaven.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I really like reading about this. This is like the reason I like this segment is because 2010, 2011 was such an important time for revolution in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like all over the place. It's just like revolution here, police brutality here, being retaliated at again by another revolution and another protest and a dictator being overthrown. Like an amazing, like a time that I think they're definitely going to be writing about in history books.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of change happening very fast and people reeling from that. And that's even what like this episode is about. It's like, oh, well, now what? What do we do after that?
In Law and Crime and that page, it's reported that the United States denies the United Nations access to Chelsea Manning. This was like back when she was still imprisoned.
Shit, yeah. Oh my god.
Right, yeah, totally.
Also in Law and Crime, China outlaws smoking in public places. It's a really hard turn. I guess those are both related to law and crime.
Also, this affects 1/3 of smokers in the world.
Oh my god, I didn't actually read that properly. You're right.
Yeah.
I guess population numbers, that works out.
Yeah. But it's still like to think about that. I was like, oh, that's a lot of people.
That's huge, yeah. It's huge. I think that's the news.
I think that's totally the news, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Magellan.
Yes.
We are going to go to the news bag. But first, Frankie, thank you for joining us for this episode.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
That was super good and great.
I can't wait to keep hearing y'all talk about the newsroom and make me realize that some of the things I like are kind of real bad, but there's also kind of some good stuff in there.
There we go.
It's a mixed bag.
If ever there was a time to use the phrase a mixed bag, the newsroom is it.
I honestly cannot wait for y'all to get to season 2 and season 3. Just because I want to see. It's like you already mentioned a little to me about in the show and before, Alan, and your opinions on the seasons. I can't wait for Magellan to get there.
I'm so scared.
I can't wait for Africa. I can't wait. I'm being vague.
Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street. I can't wait for WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
The whole plot of season 2, like the arcing plot. It's so bad. It's so good.
Really
Season
scary.
3, where characters you in season 1 you thought you were supposed to hate become part of the gang. Ooh, it's good stuff.
It's really good stuff. Chilling.
And by good, I mean it might be real bad.
Yes. Where can so before we let you go, where can people find you on the internet? What plug your stuff?
I'm on Twitter at Frankie Extra. The E in Frankie is the E of extra, and you can all the stuff that I do there. I post it. I also make games just for fun. I make some board games and video games, like tiny free things you can get at Frankie Extra. It's frankieextra.itch.io. You can find my stuff there, and I'm also in a Leverage Rewatch podcast. We've been going for a couple weeks now. That's Let's Steal a Podcast, and you can find that on Twitter at Let's Stealcast.
Fantastic.
Hell yeah.
Really cool.
We almost watched
Cool.
Leverage
Thank
for
you.
the show.
Yeah, I would still like. It's a long show, but I would still want to see y'all tackle it because it's a really good show.
Miguel,
Especially,
sorry.
sorry,
No, you're good.
I was just saying, especially like the first couple of episodes, like episode 2 and 3 are like really legitimately really good television. So I'd be interesting, maybe as a palate cleanser once y'all finish with this.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna need.
Yeah, and if there's an episode of Leverage you really like, if y'all ever want to be on the show, just let me know.
Ooh,
And
cross promotion.
Yeah. I'm sure Cassidy, my co-host, I'm sure she would love to have y'all.
Heck yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Frankie. We are going to throw it to the news bag for some listener-submitted questions, comments, things like that. And then we'll be back for part 2 to discuss the Blackout part 1.
Welcome back to the ChatzRoom. The second episode that we watched this week was Season 1, Episode 8, The Blackout, Part 1, Tragedy Porn, which was written, as always, by Aaron Sorkin, directed by Leslie Linka Glatter. It aired August 12th, 2012, and it takes place between May 27th and June 1st of 2011. In this episode, I don't remember what happens because, frankly, it's a Part 1, and it's kind of a lot of setup for stuff. And then before any of the plots have a chance to resolve comfortably, the power goes out. And then it's like, hey, see you next week for another episode. What did you think of this episode, Magellan?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I agree with you that there's some wheel spinning going on here, and there isn't a lot of resolution to some of the character stuff that's set up, so it's hard to talk holistically about that. But I actually really appreciated the framing of this episode as, it's been over a year since Newsnight 2.0 had its brand new mission statement, and this is the moment where they're starting to sell out again. I really liked seeing that and thinking about that in the context of real world news stories. Because it helped me to have a more critical perspective on some of the things that I took for granted as being popular stories back in 2011. And I also really liked the addition of the character of Mackenzie's ex-boyfriend. What's his name? Sort of like a beard guy.
Oh, I mean, I just kept calling him Paul Schneider in my notes.
Yeah.
Or the guy that was on Parks and Rec like once.
All right. So we'll just call him that, I guess.
Paul
Doesn't
Schneider.
really matter what his name is. I liked him. He's just sort of another kind of like smooth talking, has had failures but is a genius Aaron Sorkin character. But I like those characters. I like to listen to those characters talk sometimes.
He serves kind of an important purpose, which is to mix up the Mackenzie and Will relationship. Brian Brenner.
Brian. Okay.
Brian. Hey, I'm Brian.
Brian.
Paul Schneider is the most nothing actor in the world. He plays things very straight, and he cusses a lot for some reason. Like, he's the character that Aaron Sorkin gives a lot of, like, what are you fucking doing? You're being fucking irresistible right now. These cupcakes are fucking delicious.
I mean, that really worked to his detriment in Parks and Rec, but I think it works for him here.
He couldn't stop swearing on Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
It was really bad because that show's already so wholesome, and it's on cable, so it just didn't.
Yeah, he was supposed to be Amy Poehler's love interest, and it just didn't work out at all.
He couldn't stop saying slurs. Okay, so the main sort of news thing that happens is Specifically on May 27th, 2011, they're talking about the Casey Anthony trial.
Yeah.
Which,
so this is a perfect trial or a perfect news story to have this conversation about, because it's a legitimate criticism of cable news. Some of the criticisms that Sorkin has are maybe more invented than others, but this is a legitimate criticism that sometimes frequently cable news takes stories that should not be national news and blows them up into these events. And so the situation in which Casey Anthony murdered her daughter
correct,
was played out in the public eye in the context of her trial for days, for weeks. And the position that's taken in this episode is that Mackenzie has been refusing to let Newsnight cover that story at all, because rightfully she thinks that it is just a story to entertain people, to get people to feel like they're better than somebody. And it does not have the sort of positive relevance that other stories might have. Following this story about a woman murdering her child, while it's important to bring her to trial and to bring her to justice, it does not ultimately inform people as citizens, right? It's not about how you interact with your government, with the people around you. It's just sort of
it doesn't foster an informed electorate, as she said many episodes ago.
It's just sort of a true crime story. So she's very much against it. Reese has them all in his office, and he says, "You've lost 500,000 viewers
to Nancy Grace
because you're not covering this thing." And so it sets up the stakes for the episode that we need to sell out and cover this thing so that we can have the cachet to do the things that we want to do. And so I appreciated that, because the Casey Anthony story, when it was going on, we were in high school, and it was something that I just kind of accepted as being part of the landscape of journalism without really critically analyzing, like, why are we talking about this? Because it's one of many stories like that catapults to national attention. So Mac's really against that. I don't know if you had thoughts on the Casey Anthony stuff at all.
I definitely was going to ask you during this episode, like, what was it that was important about the Casey Anthony case that it became of national interest? And I guess it is really just people like hearing about this kind of stuff because it makes them feel better, and it's kind of like juicy drama, but it's real life. Like, that's a real crime that somebody did, and they're going to be on trial with it for months, maybe even years. And people kind of like made her into this sort of heel celebrity and this person that we can villainize and like criticize in the landscape of like domestic relationships. And some people even used it as like, well, women in relationships can be bad for XYZ reasons, and like all this like really nasty stuff that we placed onto this like real thing that happened to a real person. And so yeah, that was definitely a thing that I agreed with Mackenzie on, is that doesn't need to be a segment, even though people love hearing about that stuff.
Right. So that's one of the stories that sticks in Mackenzie's craw in this episode. What does that mean, that phrase? What is a craw? Is it like your mouth?
Stick in your craw? I thought it was like a crab thing.
Because of crawdads?
I mean, maybe.
Craw is your throat.
The crop of a bird or insect, the stomach of an animal. Huh.
All right, well.
There you go. So, okay. My problem with the rest of the plots of this episode is, I mean, the only other one that I remember is there's their mock debate, which...
Yep, which seems like it's going to get some more play in the next episode, so we can kind of just pay lip service to that.
Yeah, ultimately, you just want to see it happen. You hear people talk about it. You see Maggie have fun playing against Michelle Bachmann, and like Aaron Sorkin loves having characters like play the roles of people and get to like step in and out of those roles. So she's like being in the debate, and then she kind of goes like, well, this is now Maggie talking, and this is now my character, and I think Jim is shitty, but also I think Michelle Bachmann is shitty, because she claims that, like, that's actually a very good Maggie scene, where she says that Michelle Bachmann is terrible because she claims that God told her to run for president, and to say that God like chose one person specifically and took their time to be like, you should run for a U.S. president in 2011 is like really offensive to Christians.
Yeah.
Actually, and using that name in vain is like way more offensive than like all of the like Muslims that people seem to villainize so much at this in the world.
Right. It was a cool sentiment from Maggie that was weirdly played off as like, Maggie's acting a little crazy right now.
Exactly.
What's going on here?
Jim being like, "Can you please stop calling me a girl? I'm not a girl." And it's like, wow,
Yeah,
weird
what
how
the-
misgendering feels bad.
That was so odd because that was just so. It wasn't funny. I guess it was supposed to be funny.
He has a lot of like masculinity issues, I guess. He clings to it.
Yeah, that was really.
It's very awkward, though. I agree with
really
you.
Bothered me.
Also, another question that this is like legitimately, I was very tired when I watched this episode, and I like dozed off during a couple, I don't think key scenes, but what I wanted to ask you was like, they do bring up the Anthony Weiner Twitter dick pic situation that happened in this time where, what was his actual position?
He's a congressman.
Right. Congressman Anthony Weiner basically direct messaged a bunch of people, a bunch of creepy stuff, and then posted onto his main Twitter account, like some of that stuff by accident. And this is a congressman, and that was like not even like a big deal, but it was just like, well, awkward, shitty, terrible thing to do, bad. And they cover it insofar as that lady who looks like, I always get her mixed up with Marguerite Moreau, comes onto the show and basically says like,
she's been in a lot of TV stuff. I don't remember what else, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna ask you like, what's the Alison Becker is the actress's name?
Mm-hmm.
Comes on the show and talks to. Well, everybody basically has this fun little like deferral game where they're like, "Who's gonna talk to the Wiener girl?" And they like play the role of like next in line of succession, and it goes all the way down to Maggie, and then she tries to defer it and she can't, so she has to talk to the girl and like engage with her story, which seems like something you shouldn't feel bad about doing or you shouldn't like begrudge doing, even though I guess the implication is this girl's story like isn't that important. I was very confused by this.
It's a really, really interesting and odd piece of this episode to be examining in this sort of like in the moment that we're in that's concurrent with the Me Too movement and the general public attitude that we've taken towards any form of sexual misconduct on the part of men in power. This episode is essentially saying, so what if Anthony Weiner is using his position to send pictures of his penis to women? He's only the congressman of a small district, and there are other things that we should be worrying about. So we shouldn't bother to do a news story about this. It's a waste of our time. Yeah. That's Mackenzie's position, which is, on the one hand, you could say, I guess it makes sense that we shouldn't spend time devoted to this one. Like it shouldn't be our lead story. But on the other hand, to dismiss outright this sort of sexual misconduct, it's just very indicative of the culture that we had, I think, prior to this moment when this moment was still percolating and developing. That Aaron Sorkin could write an episode that says like, this Anthony Weiner stuff, it's bullshit, right, guys? Come on.
Well, the problem, sorry to cut you off, is that it paints that character, the girl.
Yeah.
Like,
so yeah.
Like she's just she's wasting everybody's time, and she's like trying to get some sort of like basic level of 15 minutes of fame out of this.
Right. It legitimizes one of the main ways in which people discredit women who come forward to say that they've been involved in these situations that have made them uncomfortable or have, harmed that in which they've experienced physical, emotional, mental harm. And that way of discrediting is to say that they're only doing it to get famous or to have some sort of national recognition. And this episode is saying that's what this girl is doing. Like, clearly that's how she's being written, that she was involved in something that she, Aaron Sorkin goes so far as to clearly show us that she was in a thing that she thinks was consensual. And so she's only being involved in this conversation to advance herself and to gain some form of celebrity, which is it's really gross. Because it supports using that sort of thinking in situations where the experience of the woman involved is can be seen as definitely more negative than the one here. Where, if she's being painted as like she was in this situation that she believed was totally consensual in this way that Aaron Sorkin is constructing her, then he's making it easy for the audience to look at her and say like, okay, whatever. But then it makes it easier for them to look at any woman and say, okay, whatever, which is fairly harmful.
Precisely, yeah. You need these characters to treat her like a person and treat her story like it's something legitimate. But instead, they're like, oh, you realize he has a wife, right? And she's like, yeah, I know. And she still clearly goes along with it. And they read the tweets out loud, which feels like a weird invasion of her privacy, even though she does like bring them to the newsroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then she asks for a latte because she's like a privileged white girl who's just trying to get famous.
Right.
And she's like, I was going to be on Access Hollywood. Can we do a pre-interview before this? And they're just like, oh, this snobby, shitty girl. Like, it's just like making her look like that is enough to tell me that the writers on this show are taking a stance, at least in this character's way, and being like, well,
and
sometimes they just
totally
lie about it.
Focusing on, I mean, I don't know if this was a later revelation in the Anthony Weiner story, but he had these sorts of conversations with women who were underage, right? Wasn't that a later part of this story? But maybe that was kind of the second wave of learning things about him. Whatever the case, since this episode's release, what little stock Anthony Weiner had in the public consciousness as like in any way a decent guy has completely plummeted. And so on many levels, this plotline just feels really gross that they're dismissing it as like, why the fuck would we cover this Anthony Weiner stuff? What a waste of our time. It's just weird.
It's super bad. Yep, and it's very weird. I don't know. I don't think we can't. It's hard to talk about this stuff because we haven't seen part 2 yet. Right. But I don't think it suddenly magically redeems itself.
Yeah, I think it's making a valid point about the Casey Anthony story.
Yeah,
that these sorts of stories are being packaged in such a way as to make Americans feel better than the person involved. And the whole scene where Don is like, the cable news doctor, and he's dissecting all the different aspects of the Nancy Grace story, that was awesome. That was a really well done sequence that I really, really appreciated, because it was actually showing us, proving to us, here are the things that are broken about cable news that we want to fix. And it's taken us 8 episodes or whatever to get there, where we're seeing the thing that we're saying we're going to improve. So that I was bought into. But then to have the same dismissive attitude towards a story that's all about holding public representatives accountable to their actions, that feels like it falls more into the bucket of informed citizenship. And so that feels like a story that should not have been dismissed as quickly as the Casey Anthony story.
There it is. It's so weird that those are 2 plots in the same episode. And then there's also like 3 more things that happen, like some of which are really good and some of which are terrible. For example, Sloane in this episode doesn't really have a lot of good to do.
Yeah.
Like that scene where she throws Neil against the wall because he says like, I'm going to slander you to, what is it? To like get into a hacking group?
Yeah, so he wants to get into like a troll message board or something, which he describes to Mackenzie as an online clubhouse. Just like the dumbest. He's like, do you know what trolls are?
They hide under bridges and collect money from travelers.
Just silly. Anyway. And then he says, I need to troll somebody to be welcomed into the troll website. So he says, hey, Sloane, can I troll you and talk about how big your butt is? And for some reason, that causes her to throw him against a wall in like, I don't know, self-conscious rage or something. It was absurd.
And then be like, wait, but really? Is my butt that big? Like, Aaron Sorkin! Stop!
Again, this is the kind of character writing that would have been less obviously bad in a 90s sitcom. Like if somebody on Friends or something held Joey up against the wall and was like, you just said my butt looked big, we wouldn't be spending 5 minutes or whatever dissecting why that's a bad thing. But on this show that's about the news, about people being murdered in news stories and about people being harassed in other news stories, and about the government literally shutting down and the monetary system collapsing, it really just destroys the credibility of Sloane's character to do that with her. And then the moment later where has a truly triumphant, competent moment where she's yelling at Mackenzie about, like, why are we not covering this story about the government and the budget? Why did we not cover this months ago, weeks ago? That scene that should have been really impactful the whole time, all I could think about was, man, 20 minutes ago she held somebody against the wall and wondered if her butt was too big.
Exactly.
It's just silly.
It's very silly. It doesn't pan out anywhere, though. It goes absolutely nowhere. Again, one of those where you're like, is this supposed to go somewhere in the second half? Is Sloane going to get good? Maybe. Probably
maybe
not.
I hope so.
God. But yeah, so there was that. I want to get to the meat of the episode, though. I want to get to the Charlie stuff. I'm trying to see if there's any other brief things.
There's a scene where he talks to his therapist, which I think might be it. I think that's the last we see of David Krumholtz.
Yeah, I think that is the last David Krumholtz scene. It's weird. I feel really bad for the person that's in the office.
Yeah, who's having their session.
They're having their therapy session, and then this like loud asshole is knocking on the door, and these two men are yelling outside, and your therapist has to be like, just give me a minute, I'll be right back. And like the way that he manipulates the doctor by being like, I paid you, like, do what I said because I fucking paid you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, he manipulates the doctor. He's manipulating, what was his name? Ben? Brian?
Yeah.
Brian. He's manipulating Brian, like, you're washed up and I own you now, and you're going to do a good story and I know you can do it, but, like, you're doing it my way. Will's being a shitty dude, and then just having Brian there is obviously totally throwing Mackenzie out of whack, and getting her really frustrated. But clearly Will is like doing it on purpose. All of that stuff I appreciated because it's illustrating a moment in which Will is being self-destructive and he's returning to old tendencies slightly before the end of the season, because that, to us as a viewer, helps us encapsulate and understand his arc so far. Like, oh, this guy who was terrible in the first episode has actually become a little bit more likable. And now he's backing up on that stuff. So I appreciated the Will McAvoy plot. I appreciated Brian. And, I thought that Mackenzie in this episode was frazzled for legitimate reasons instead of being frazzled because she's a woman written by Aaron Sorkin. And I thought that she was sticking to her guns and having legitimate philosophical quandaries about what to do and what to sell out and what not to sell out. So, yeah, I appreciate it. I bought into that plot.
And that's definitely going to go, that stuff's going to go somewhere.
Yeah, in the second episode, for sure.
Yeah, Brian's in the second episode, and I don't know, I just like it when people come to this newsroom and are like, what are you guys doing? Why are your relationships the way they are?
Yeah.
And him and his like dumb pen and his pad and his glasses that he selectively puts on and off when he feels like it to look dramatic.
Yeah, I like that. That was cheesy.
It's good cheesy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think basically the last big thing that happens in this episode is sort of the reveal of what's going on with Charlie's source and how high up this whole plot goes.
Yeah.
He is asked by his source to visit him in the New York Public Library, which I guess because it's a quiet public space and the walls are thick and it's historically significant.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. He goes to the library. We get this really shitty scene where he runs into another guy and goes like, "Are you late for dinner?" And the guy's like, "Excuse me?" And it sounds like he's soliciting this guy or something. And then he says, "Are you Hancock?" Clearly a joke. Clearly a bad joke. And then he turns around and the guy's like, "Charlie." And then it's that guy. It's an elderly black man. We have one more person of color on the show. Yay! way. And they're like a one-off. So we meet the real late for dinner, and it's Mr. Hancock, and he basically tells Charlie, I work for the NSA. I'm like the technology. He has like this really long, complicated title. Like I'm the technology and information security technician guru lord extreme. And I have a lot of information that you don't. And for example, that TMI News place that you guys hate so much? And he's like, yeah, TMI News. They're like a gossip place. He's like, you know how the government, like, clearly, we always joke about how they can, like, track all your shit? Charlie's like, yeah. He's like, well, put 2 and 2 together. TMI News is using government surveillance tech to spy on people. And it's hella illegal. And that's your company doing that. Because they're under the same corporation.
Right.
And, Charlie's kind of shook by this, and it feels like it's a big deal. But again, it's like, this is a gossip column. Like, it is like a breach of American public privacy, obviously.
Right.
It is a federal crime being applied to the gossip magazine's side story that we didn't even remember was being important, like the Nina stuff.
Yeah. It feels a little odd. Yeah.
It just feels like they're putting a really important... It turns like into Metal Gear Solid, where he's like, the government has all these things in your phone, and you have to take the battery out of your phone so that we can talk and...
Yeah,
blah,
but you
blah.
don't care about the government surveilling you. What you care about is the gossip magazine surveilling you. That's really important.
That's how they're getting...
So listen, tell people about the government stuff, whatever, that's fine. And in exchange for you doing your job that you should be enthusiastic about doing... I'll help you get rid of this B plot that we don't feel like having in the second season.
So let's wipe it right out. And you should go talk to Leona Lansing.
Yeah.
Which, a blessing from God, we get another Leona Lansing scene.
Thank you.
Every one of these is an absolute gift.
Yep.
He's outside of her limousine. She has to shove a bunch of people away. Like, get out of here. I'm having a private chat with my friend, Charlie. We're having friend talk. Let's smile and be friendly. And he's like, homegirl, is it real? Is that allowed? Is that allowed? And she's like, yeah, I'm doing what I can do because I can. Fuck you. And this is what you guys get for trying to go to clap back at the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers.
Ugh. Come on, you guys aren't the Huffington Post.
Huffington Post.
The Huffington Post.
Huffington Post.
I can't tell if I like it more when we do the real voice or if we do we're putting a Y in there for some reason.
Post.
The Post. The Post.
Huffington Post.
I think that's the gist of that conversation. Is she has all these cool lines about like that's what you guys get for trying to talk back. And I told you. She basically like reminds him. I told you. I said I'm going to create a scenario where the Will McAvoy's firing seems like the smartest decision. It's going to solve itself.
Right. And Charlie says, "Don't do that. Stop doing it.
Don't do it.
Wink, wink."
I feel like Charlie has become relegated in this season to like he handles all of the high, and it makes sense. That is technically his role. It's correct, but like those plots never interact with anyone else, so it feels like he's living out his own show.
I kind of like that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool dynamic
because there are things that he just has to know and deal with that shouldn't bother anybody else.
Right. You don't want it to go like we were just talking about the rules of Succession earlier, and like watching it go up and up and up from like the most basic intern to like Tess to Maggie to Jim, all the way up to Mackenzie, and then Will, and then Charlie, and then the Lansings, and then the Koch brothers. Like just what and where people can disseminate information and how far down, and how that stuff gets brought down is really interesting, and it says a lot about like the way that information is spread in the modern day. That we like have to be so selective about stuff that we just cannot. Like the average person cannot know this. It is not worth them knowing this. This has to be Charlie's plot because this is a huge deal that doesn't matter until it blows up. So for now, it's Charlie's story. I think that's actually good writing. I can't believe I said it out of my mouth.
No, I agree. I agree with you.
I think that pretty much covers the episode, though. The episode ends with they're about to actually go through with it, and do the interview with the girl, the wiener girl, if you will. And you're ready for the episode to they're finally going to do the news. You're finally going to get the thing in the newsroom that's good. And then, boop. Basically, Mackenzie says, I don't know if this is right. I don't know. God, give me a sign. Which I don't like it when television or movie characters say, like, God, give me a sign, and then you get a sign. I think it's super corny. Like, they get a really obvious sign.
It was cheesy. And then she was like, he has such great comedic timing. And
Yep.
that's the end of the episode. Yeah, it was cheesy.
All the lights go out, and then that's the end.
But I did appreciate that it was, we were given a clue to that in conversations between characters about the weather when they were like, why does this matter? The fact that the story Reese wanted to run turned out to come true. I found that funny.
Right, he wanted to run the weather story?
Yeah, he was like, it's going to be 98 degrees. You know what happens? Blackouts.
And they're like, shut up, Reese. We're going to talk about the real important stuff.
Yeah, Will's like, I'm not doing a weather story.
Yeah. Oh, Reese. Oh, honey.
I had two stray thoughts a few stray thoughts, I guess.
Okay.
Let's see. Let me just skim through. So the first is that this idea of a news channel losing viewers feels weird to me because it's not a sequential TV show. It's not like if you lose people this week, they're never going to come back. Obviously, people are going to the other channel because it has the story they want to see. But when that story's over, maybe Newsnight is going to have a story that they want to see. It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't feel that dire, but I guess the thing that matters is that advertisers are going to look at that and want to pull their advertisements or something. Just the whole ratings thing still doesn't feel like that meaningful of a plot, a reason to drive the plot.
I think there's a sideline in this episode where someone says, people, realistically, we do all this work, but really the average person watches the first 10 minutes of the news and then closes it.
Sloan says that.
Yeah. Like, really none of what we're doing matters to the average person, but the intelligent person who's paying attention needs the good news. And they need to watch us because we're delivering the good stuff, not the other guy. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, like, their whole ratings conversation is important. But when Reese is talking about like numbers and advertisers, I hate that. That all of that stuff goes through one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know why this is important. I understand how business works, but why am I as if you were being exposed to this? I should not have to see this.
Mm-hmm. Charlie and his contact were talking pretty loudly for a library.
Yeah, that's a TV thing, I guess, because you don't like whispering can only be so quiet to still pick up on microphones.
Yep. Charlie also hasn't seen Batman.
I want to watch Batman with Charlie.
Yeah, that was a fun moment.
Specifically The Dark Knight. Because the guy's like, you're referring to the line where the guy's like, you remember in The Dark Knight where Batman...
Yeah, that thing from Batman with the technology that Morgan Freeman thought he shouldn't have.
And he's like, no. And he's like, what do you mean no? No, I haven't seen the movie.
I don't know what you're talking about.
He's also... I think it's Will who in the previous episode references All the President's Men. Like, some people in this show have watched a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Charlie references the Mary Tyler Moore Show. When he sees Will's high, he's like, why are you like the news guy from the Mary Tyler Moore Show? And I'm like, you're... Okay, clearly Charlie has a taste.
Mm-hmm.
Has a taste. Oh, boy.
That's pretty much all I got. Yeah, I'm curious to see where this goes in part 2.
Part 2. Do you want to take a peek at the news?
Sure.
Just related to the last one that we were talking about. Bhutan's opposition leader, I'm not going to try to pronounce that name, condemns the country's anti-smoking law as, quote, utter madness, as 3 more people are jailed for possessing cigarettes. That's the, like, sort of reverse milkshake duck, where it's like, we finally banned cigarettes. Breaking news, we regret to inform you that people hate that we banned cigarettes.
Right.
A Serbian court rules that former Bosnian Serb leader, I've read this name before, is fit to stand a genocide trial at The Hague. What's this? I've heard of this guy's name. He's like super terrifying. I'm sorry. I can't remember people's name. Ratko is the first name. People know what I'm talking about. That was crazy.
I don't remember that.
You got it. Yeah. Serbian military history is really, it's full of a lot of, it's like, we talk about like the handful of dictators that we know about in world history,
Yeah.
but like Bosnia, Serbia, all of those areas, just full of them. And it's really unfortunate because like beautiful countries, but a lot of like terrible dictators over the years that have been replaced by other terrible ones.
Wow.
And then
E.
yeah,
coli outbreak in Germany.
thought to have originated from Spanish cucumbers.
Oh.
There was a lot of stuff. Remember it seemed for like briefly, like legitimately, like E. coli or whatever was going to be the end of us. That was going to be the plague.
Yeah, I feel like I kept hearing about that.
And meanwhile, now we're in like the worst flu season in like decades. And realistically, because a lot of people take this kind of stuff and turn it into like what zombie stories are, but if like a virus were to spread the way that zombie stuff does in movies, it would be the flu. It would be that kind of like symptoms aren't that bad, but it's got such high prevalence that like everybody has it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's most of the interesting stuff. There's more. It's basically a lot of like the Libyan civil war continues. The United Kingdom is bringing effort over there, and opposition. There's protests in Yemen. Lots of protests, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that pretty much covers it.
All right. Alan, do you want to hear what we are watching next week?
I do.
All right. Next week, can you believe it? It's our last episode for season 1 of the Newsroom.
Wow.
We are watching season 1, episode 9, The Blackout, part 2, Mock Debate. Will and the staff stage a mock debate for 2 Republican Party officials. Mac has an epiphany during a power outage. Charlie vets the credibility of an NSA insider. Lisa goes off script during an interview. Neil goes undercover as an internet troll. Yuck. The other thing that I forgot to say is I'm already annoyed at the notion that they are going to like change debates forever.
Don't even front. Don't even front, Newsroom, like you can do that. Come on.
We'll see how they back that up in the next one. We're also watching season 1, episode 10, The Greater Fool. Season 1 finale. Nina Howard surprises Mac with a damning revelation. Jim and Maggie reach a crossroad. Sloan weighs a new job offer. Neil uses his internet alter ego to smoke out a threat. Will, Mac, and Charlie face off with Leona and Reese.
In pitched combat, gladiatorial arena. There's a gun.
All right.
I was going to say I can't wait for that episode of the Newsroom where there's a gun, but they already did that.
That's true. They did.
Oh, silly Newsroom. Tricks are for kids. Well, folks, that's pretty much going to do it for our show. Magellan, do me a favor. Where can people find you on the online?
People can find me on the online on Twitter at JustAFluke. That's JOSTAPFLUKE. And also by listening to Adulthood, the other podcast that I do. It's spelled how it's always spelled. It hasn't changed. And it's a fun show. Alan, what about you?
Well, Magellan, people can find me on Twitter at Alan Ibrahim. It's spelled ALLENIBRAHIM. And you can listen to me on Fireside Friends, which is going to be releasing our January episode very soon. We just recorded both halves of it. It's a monthly podcast now about pop culture, media, and friendship. And it's really good. You can find it at firesidefriends.net. It's on the Abnormal Mapping Network.
That's great.
So check that out if you want to listen to my voice. And if you have questions or comments for us, please don't forget to email us at chatspot@gmail.com. That's CHATZPOD@gmail.com. And tweet us at chatspot. Spelled the same way. We read those tweets. It's very good. It's a good fun place for people to hang out. And then, of course, if you like us, rate us on iTunes. We love it. We love you.
For sure.
I love you. I'm Will McAvoy. I want to eat your toast.
Toast.
So go out there. Go make some toast with the most.
Write us a Facebook
post. And just kind of keep living your best life. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the ChatzRoom. Good night.